You know how we try to make sense of things? It's like we're always gathering these little bits, aren't we? A news snippet, something someone said, maybe a study, and trying to build a picture.
Right, piecing together fragments, and sometimes the fragments themselves or how we get them are pretty fascinating.
Exactly. In today's deep dive, well, it goes down a really interesting path. Thanks to you sharing this unique set of materials, we're looking at transcripts from investigative hypnosis sessions,
Yeah.
all focused on Elon Musk.
Yeah, it's quite a collection. And this isn't just, one person under hypnosis. These sessions used something called the Grifasi method.
Okay, the Grifasi method. Let's unpack that a little. From what we can tell in these transcripts, it involves multiple sessions, right? Different hypnotists, different people being hypnotized,
Yeah.
sometimes even across languages.
That's the core idea. The point is to look for the common threads, the things that keep showing up even with all those variables.
So, the thinking is, these recurring bits are maybe more likely to point towards something significant. Helps filter out, perhaps, individual bias or suggestion from just one session.
Precisely. It sounds like a very careful, collaborative process. The goal isn't to say this hypnotic session is the absolute truth, but more like, hey, isn't it interesting that this specific idea keeps popping up across different people in different sessions?
It's like a form of cross-referencing, aiming to reduce that noise.
Exactly. Minimize the impact of, say, one hypnotist's perspective or one subject's particular imagination.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our mission, if you will, is to explore these transcripts you send over. We want to really focus on those recurring themes, the narratives about Musk that kept emerging from these different hypnotic viewpoints.
We're hunting for those echoes, those shared perceptions, to see what kind of picture starts to form.
And of course, we need to keep in mind, and it's important for you listening to, the nature of this information. It is from hypnosis sessions, so it's inherently complex, maybe speculative.
Absolutely. We're not presenting these as facts carved in stone. Think of them more as compelling insights into how different people perceive this very public figure while in a hypnotic state.
And the sources, just to be clear, are transcripts from YouTube videos of these sessions, all using that Grifasi method. Different operators, different subjects.
Right. So ready to jump in?
Let's do it. And maybe the most, well, unexpected theme that kept coming up was this idea of Elon Musk having non-human aspects, or being some kind of hybrid.
It was striking, wasn't it, how consistently that appeared across completely separate accounts. Multiple subjects described him in ways that, well, that went beyond just standard human traits, often talking about his etheric DNA or his energetic makeup.
Etheric DNA.
Okay.
So that's like a non-physical blueprint in some belief systems.
Kind of, yeah. A subtle energy pattern. And one subject, Orion, actually reported seeing non-human remnants in his. Described him as not 100% viable in his human body. Even mentioned bugs at that etheric DNA level.
Bugs, wow. That's quite specific, isn't it?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what leads to that kind of perception.
It really does. And building on that, another subject, Agnes, echoed this, but added some interesting details. Agnes perceived him as a mixture of humanoid and Dracos.
Dracos, like reptilian entities in some lore.
That's the reference, yes. And she also saw something very roboticized, implants. Even compared him to a bionic Terminator.
A bionic Terminator.
And Agnes suggested this wasn't just recent, but that his DNA was like this from birth, just reinforced over time. Initially more draconian, apparently, than augmented by humanoid server.
So again, this blend, part entity, part tech, part human, but not quite any single one.
Seems to be the drift. And then Lily's account, it went in a slightly different direction, but still related. She didn't see typical etheric DNA. Instead, she perceived encrypted bars.
Encrypted bars, like .code.
Yeah, directly linked it to AI, technology, futuristic hybridizations. She even mentioned a strong smell gunpowder and metallic alloys.
Wow.
And viewed Musk less as a person, more like a product, or even currency for negotiations between governments across timelines. Not a standard human essence at all.
So a very technological, almost transactional view of him.
Definitely. And Vish's account added yet another layer. This subject saw very little of human in him, called him a shapeshifter hybrid, high-percentage alien entity.
A shapeshifter.
Yeah. Described this entity part as powerful, authoritarian, part of a hierarchy, a hierarchy, possibly linked to the idea of archons, maybe?
Archons, right. Those controlling forces in some Gnostic texts.
Could be. And Visha also pictured him surrounded by robotics and advanced alien tech. It's interesting how technology keeps weaving into these non-human descriptions, isn't it?
It really is. And didn't Irina also mention something similar?
Yes. Irina also specifically identified a Draco presence in his etheric DNA, so that echoes Agnes's point again.
Okay, so that's pretty undeniable as a recurring theme then, this non-human or hybrid perception. What else really stood out as a common thread across these sessions?
Another major one was the idea of pre-incarnation influences, or agreements. This sense that things happened before this lifetime that significantly steered his path.
Like setting things up beforehand?
Kind of. It raises questions about free will versus destiny, at least as perceived by these subjects.
Oriane had a really detailed account of this, didn't she? Described 3 reptilians in a SAS, like a compartment.
Yeah, that's the term used, giving him instructions, almost like loading a program or reading him in an open book.
And what were the instructions about?
Apparently, he was in a fluid reptilian state himself then, absorbing info about a global change, a revolution, a reset, even things like religious deviation and superior technology. And he was told to be discreet.
Wow, that's quite the pre-life briefing.
It really is. And Agnes also touched on this, though less dramatically. Saw him in an antechamber, or a large reservoir with lots of other beings or consciousnesses before incarnating, suggesting well, a busy waiting room, perhaps.
And Lily's vision was different again, right? More symbolic.
Very different, quite dramatic. She saw constellations mixed with holocausts, massacres, plundering, suggesting his lineage, or maybe his energetic line, was tied to massive human catastrophes.
Good grief.
And this, in her view, set up a timeline for him to manifest as some kind of major figure, antiquing, antichrist, king, or Christ, all heavily connected to blood, rituals, sacrifices. She didn't see a typical soul entering body pre-incarnation.
That's intense. Very different from the
It
others.
shows the variety, even within a theme. Vish's account put him in a leadership role elsewhere, too. Head of an army, a general in another space-time, with 15 similar brigades or aspects of himself, all with that same hybridized DNA.
15 versions, like fractal selves.
Something like that, suggesting a recurring pattern or role across realities, according to this subject.
And Anastasia. She had a different take on the pre-life choices.
Yeah, Anastasia saw him at a table. Multiple choices presented by 3 beings, 2 humanoids, 1 reptiloid.
A negotiation, almost.
It sounded more like options being presented. She noted a friendly, trusting vibe, but crucially, she suggested his real desires for nature, mountains, a quiet life were kind of suppressed by these influences.
So a conflict.
Potentially. His choice for the tech path was linked to curiosity, apparently, and maybe past life familiarity with AI. It paints this picture of maybe a divergence between his inner self and the path he's on.
Interesting. And Irina mentioned something specific, too.
Yes. Irina saw a predefined event connected to a White House role, decided at his reincarnation, suggesting some level of pre-planning for political involvement.
Okay. So from detailed reptilian briefings to choices at a table to links with huge historical events, this theme of pre-incarnation setup seems really significant in these narratives.
Definitely a major point of convergence.
Which leads us nicely into the next big one, the connection to artificial intelligence and technology. This feels almost inseparable from how he was perceived in these sessions.
Absolutely. It wasn't just seen as tools he uses. It felt much deeper, more intrinsic, like a fundamental part of his being and purpose, according to multiple subjects.
Right. Oriane, going back to that pre-incarnation briefing she saw, superior technology was specifically mentioned as part of his instruction.
Yes, and in the present, Oriane saw him facilitating the pairing of humans, though. Interestingly, she specified not fully human humans with AI for its complete global rollout.
Pairing, like
What?
merging.
The image was walking in pairs, AI taking his information, him taking AI's information, a very symbiotic or maybe parasitic relationship.
And Lily took this even further, right? Emphasized the total link.
Totally. She said they were inseparable, couldn't exist without each other, described him as transhumanoid.
Transhumanoid.
Yeah. And Lily envisioned him creating the conditions for us to accept the moon as a necessary base, imagining multiple moons as insertion points for future transhuman beings.
Multiple moons, wow.
And she also talked about a technological virus spread via AI, infecting minds, causing dissociation. It's quite a dark vision of where things could be heading and his role in it.
It really is. And that ties back to Agnes seeing him as very robotized, like that bionic Terminator with implants. It's like the line between human and machine is just gone in their perception.
Exactly. Visha saw his main goal as using AI to replace humans with robots he controls.
Replace human.
That was the perception. Forming a satellite network linked to some alien energy source to control minds, create holographic illusions at a government level, like making dead figures seem alive.
Okay, yeah, control's a big theme there.
A huge theme. Vicious saw Musk as actively opening the doors for AI.
And Irina's perspective was almost a literal merging.
Pretty much, like he's part of the intelligence or it's part of him, saw half his body as this robotic advanced tech.
Half his body.
That's what she perceived. And noted a light activating around him when he was young, like 7 or 8, coinciding with this AI connection kicking in, leading to information downloads, connections with powerful people.
And his purpose now, according to Irina,
to get the population to accept this technology, making it mainstream desirable.
Okay. And Claudia's take, similar themes.
Very similar. She saw the agenda as basically discarding the human part emotions, feelings through the allure of a transhumanist new era pushed by his companies and satellites.
Discarding emotions.
Yeah, aiming for a kind of homogenization, where people might feel they can climb the ladder by just submitting to this tech integration. She even saw electric cars as a sort of placebo.
A placebo? How so?
To get people used to integrating with AI, making them dependent on a larger system. And Neuralink, seen as a future testing ground for eventually displacing humans altogether.
So across the board then, this deep, fundamental link to AI and tech, it's not just what he does, but seemingly who he is, according to these accounts, which brings us to the fourth theme. Intentions and impact. What did the subjects perceive as his goals, the consequences?
Well, Orion reported his subliminal intentions as pushing past human limits because of his hybrid nature to bring about a great change, establishing a different belief system, wielding power ruthlessly, manipulating how things appear.
A great change. Sounds ominous.
It had that feel. Also an intention to divert humans from their, quote, natural path, a focus on large-scale transformation, maybe manipulation.
And Lily saw him more as a tool.
Yes, tied to a council of beings using him for their own agenda, global reset control. Saw him as a sociopath, psychopath, lacking real humanity, designed to be either a savior or an executioner, depending on, well, activation, it seemed.
Up on in a bigger game, potentially.
That was the perception, like an agent maybe unaware of the full scope.
Whereas Vish's take was more straightforward.
Much more. Just govern the world. Technology, power, wealth, even buying nations. Simple ambition for global dominance, as perceived in that session.
And Anastasia offered that contrasting view again, the inner conflict.
Right. Suggesting his subconscious, his deeper self, actually yearns for nature, quietness. Clashing with the tech path driven by those pre-incarnation influences. It introduces that element of internal struggle, perhaps?
A potential disconnect between the persona and the soul, maybe?
Possibly, according to that account.
Yeah.
And then Irina saw his intention as wanting to be venerated, followed, to be an idol whose ideas are copied.
Like a cult of personality.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And she linked that predestined White House role specifically to building trust, getting people to accept the technology. Drew a parallel to the pandemic and injections as preparing people for this kind of technological integration.
Building trust is a strategy.
Exactly. And Claudia echoed that, building this image of being powerful, intelligent, so people adopt the tech without asking too many questions, gaining influence for that larger tech agenda.
So the intentions perceived range quite a bit. Manipulated agent, power-hungry individual, maybe someone internally conflicted, but almost always tied to this huge technological push and societal impact. It's complex, even contradictory sometimes.
It is. Even with the common threads, the specific interpretations and nuances vary, which really highlights the subjective lens of the subconscious, processing this figure in different ways.
Well, this has definitely been a deep dive into some pretty extraordinary materials here.
Yeah.
Let's try and wrap our heads around the key shared elements we found across these hypnosis sessions.
Okay.
So number one, consistently this perception of non-human or hybrid aspects in his energy, his makeup.
Right, that came up again and again.
Number two, these significant pre-incarnation influences or agreements shaping his path. Reptilian briefings, choices at tables, links to catastrophes.
Yeah, the idea that his current trajectory was set up in some way beforehand.
Three, a really deep, crucial connection to AI and advanced technology, not just using it, but being fundamentally intertwined with it.
Yeah, absolutely central, almost defining him in some accounts.
And finally, number four, these overarching intentions related to global change, control, maybe a fundamental shift in what it means to be human, often driven by that technology.
Those seem to be the main recurring pillars we identified across the studies.
And again, we have to stress the speculative nature of info from hypnosis. But the consistency is intriguing, isn't it? Across different people, different sessions, using a method designed to find commonalities.
It is noteworthy, the fact that independent subjects under hypnosis seem to tap into similar themes. It does give you pause for thought. It's compelling.
Absolutely. It really makes you think. So you, listening, given these recurring and, let's face it, pretty unusual themes, what implications might this have for how we see technology, human evolution, the people shaping our future?
It's certainly a perspective way outside the usual narratives, a perspective these subconscious explorations seem to be highlighting quite consistently.
We definitely encourage you, if you can, to look into the transcripts themselves. Consider your own views. This deep dive, it's unconventional, sure, but it offers maybe a unique lens on a major figure.
Prompts reflection beyond the headlines, perhaps. What really stands out to you from these patterns? Is it the hybrid idea, the AI connection, the pre-life stuff?
It's definitely the consistency for me. Across such varied individuals, makes you wonder what underlying current of perception might be flowing there. Anyway, thanks for joining us on this unique exploration.
Until next time.